The conditional operator is a methodology that you need to be aware of. It can really save you a lot of code, and it can really simplify your code. Now, let's talk about what this is. First of all, it works with 3 operands. And what it really works out to, it's a concise version of an if statement. And a lot of times when you're writing certain if statements, especially if else, then you could turn that into a statement using conditional operator, and it would be much cooler. All right, so here's the basic syntax of this. We're going to supply some sort of condition, then we will provide the results based on that condition. If it's true, the result is going to be expression 1, then the colon separates them, and if this condition is false, then the value that's going to be returned is expression 2. Now usually you'll see a variable and an equal sign in front of this, and that's the example that I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. All right, so if the condition is true, expression 1 is the result, and if the condition is false, then expression 2 is the result. And so let's just jump out and do a quick demo here and show you what this looks like. Now, I'm jumping into a project that I've created in Visual C++ 2010 Express, and you will notice that the name of the project is Conditional OPR Example right up here at the top. Okay, and then the module that I'm actually writing in, I named COND-OPR for Conditional Operator .cpp. Now, notice what I've done here. We've got our basic structure that we've had in all of our examples so far in the course, and in this one I've got my main function sitting here empty, just waiting for some code. But note up here that I have created an integer called a and assigned it the value of 14. I've created b and set it at 16. I've initialized it to 16, and then I've created c, and I didn't really initialize that to anything. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to write a little piece of code that says C should always be set to whatever's the higher of A or B. All right, well, let's start off and let's just write a little if statement for that. Let's say that if A is greater than B, then let's set C equal to A. All right, and if that's not true, we'll just put an else in there, then set C equal to B. Right? Now we're not worried about equality conditions here. All right, so don't get too caught up there. All right, now let's put a console out here, and let's say that the if result is that C equals, and then I will load right before that C, and then we'll close this out with an end line. All right, now let's run this and see what we get. Okay, we'll play with this just a second here. So we'll build this with debug, and then we will jump out to our window, and notice I left this on from before, so I'm going to close this, and I am actually going to jump out to Documents, to Visual Studio 2010 folder, then into Projects, and there's my conditional operator example, and I will go into Debug, hold down my Shift key, right click on Debug, and open command window. Didn't actually go into it, but I just right clicked on it, holding down the Shift key. Then if I do a directory, you'll notice that there is my conditional operator example, and so conditional, just type it out, conditional OPR example. Notice this part is not case sensitive, and notice the if result is that C equals 16. All right, let me clear this off and run that again so we can see it. The if result is 16. Now let me pull this down and make this go away. Notice B is 16, so that's what got loaded in there. All right, well, let's go back and let's make A 17, and then let's recompile and let's see if our code logic works, because at the end of this now C should be 17, which was the A value, right? And so I will call that. Notice C equals 17, so it's working. Now, is there a better way to do this? Well, the answer is obviously yes, or we wouldn't even be doing this video, right? So that was the big setup. So now let's change this. We're going to set C equal to, and we're going to say if A is, and I'm going to stretch this out so that's a little easier for you to read. We're going to say, okay, if A is greater than B, all right, then let's do this. Return the value of A, right? And if here's our condition, if A is greater than B, then grab A expression 1 and load it into C. All right? Otherwise, right, grab B if the condition A is greater than B is false. Okay? And then I'm going to grab my output line here. Going to come down, and I'm just going to change this and say that my conditional result for C is right there. And so I'll just leave these the same, all right, and we will see two results now. And so I will execute this. I'll run the debugger to build it, and then we will jump out here, clear this off, and now we'll run it. And notice that C is 17, so the if standard gave me C equals 17, and my conditional gave me C equals 17. Same amount of work, right? But let's set this back to 14, and our C should equal 16 now, because 16 is now the highest, and that's the B value. So we'll come back out here, we will run this again, and notice C is now equal to 16 on both of them. So what's the big deal here? Well, up here I had to write all this, and down here on the conditional I just had to write this. Okay, so that's conditional operators. Very cool stuff, neat thing to know, put out there in your little programming toolkit. Now let's take a look at switch statements. Now you're going to use switch statements when you have more than say three or more possibilities, and you don't want to keep just nesting if statements and nesting if statements and so forth. It gets very confusing. So I want to show you what we're going to do here, and I'm going to show you one more couple little tricks that you can use in your C++ code. But if I want to have multiple choices for a value and take separate actions based on that choice, then let's do a quick example here of how I can do that with switch statements. I'm going to create an integer called choice, and I'm going to load it up, initialize it with a value of 0. All right. Then I want to have a number of different possibilities with my code based on the value of that choice. Now, starting off at 0. This could be, 6, 12, however many choices I would like. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a switch statement. So notice I say switch, and then I'm going to take a look at choice. All right. Now, based on what gets passed in choice, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to write a block of code here with my switch statement, and the first thing I'm going to say is case 1. Now that means when choice is equal to 1, what do I want to have happen? Well, I'm going to show you another little trick here. We've been writing standard namespace console out for quite a while, and let me just start to put something in here. The value of choice is, and then we'll just put choice out here. It's a very, very simple example. Okay. Now notice we've been writing standard out, and I'm going to do this again in just a minute with a number of other cases, and I don't want to type this standard : C out every time. So I'm going to jump up here to the top, and I'm going to put in a using statement. I'm going to say using standard namespace COUT, and then I'm also going to use standard namespace inline. Now what that's going to let me do is I can now just put C out and inline, and notice it won't give me any squigglies. Now if I comment these out, okay, and use those, notice I'm getting squigglies here because it says, wait a minute dude, you should have a namespace in there. All right, so the using statement can prevent you from having to type a lot of code. All right, so that's case 1. Now if I take this and just copy this and say, you know what, okay, if case 2 happens, then put it here. All right, and change this to case 2, and it'll put out choice 3, and then I can say, okay, case 3 will go here. Now I've got a problem here. It's going to find case 1 if I put in 1, but then it's also going to go through these others. So what I want to tell it to do is break out. Once you do case 1, and if you find it, then break out of the switch statement. Okay, and so I'll put a break here, And so now what I'm going to do, right, is copy this whole thing. All right. And then I'll make this one case 4, right? And then at the very bottom, notice I am going to do one more thing. I'm going to put a default, and I'm going to say if it's not any of those, then let's just say that the default value of choice is, okay? And that'll take care of it. All right. Now this is all pretty straightforward, but now I've got another little issue I want to do here, and that is when I run my program, I want to ask the user for input, and there's a very easy way to do that in the C++ world in the console application, and I'm going to call the standard namespace, I'm going to do console in or CIN, and this allows me to stream things in, and when I bring it in, I'm going to load that into choice. Okay, now if I've done this correctly and I haven't fat fingered anything, we should see this. And again, very simple example here, so let's just run it one time and see what we get. Okay, so here we go, we're compiling it up. Let's see if we get any errors here. Nope, we didn't. We got our little flash there. Now notice it's waiting for me to input something. I'm actually going to kill this and go out here to Documents, Visual Studio 2010, go into Projects, and here's my switch example. I'll go into that. I'll right click on debug as I hold down my shift key and Windows 7 and open the command window. Okay, then I'll just type in switch example, and notice it's just sitting there and it's asking me for some input. Well, if I put 2 in and press enter, notice the value of choice is 2. All right, well, I'll do switch example again. This time I will put 4 and the value is 4. I'll run switch example again and put 8, and remember that one was the highest, and it jumped all the way down to default value, and it put that in. Let me move this up here so you can see it. Notice when I put 2, it jumped down to 2, and when I put 3, you can't really see this here, but the let's do this, the case 1 value, the case 2 value, the case 3 value, and the case 4 value. All right, so the best way to learn these things, do these kind of simple little examples, add some more functionality to them, play with them yourself, and then just see if you can figure out what's making it work, what's breaking it, that sort of thing. So now if I put a 3 in here, notice it says the case 3 value, and I'll run it again and I'll put a 2 in, and now you see in the case 2 value, a little easier to see there. Okay, that's the switch statement. Now obviously what I would usually like to do is maybe put some brackets in here and put a lot more code here. You know, if you choose this one thing, go grab something from a database. If you choose this, send an error message out. You know, do all kind of cool stuff. But anyway, that's a switch statement, and that gives you a lot more possibilities. Very clean code, very easy to read, very easy to come back and troubleshoot later. So make sure you stick the switch statement into your little programming toolbox. In this video, I want to introduce the idea of looping in C++. Now this is not a big, huge deal because almost any program that you write in, you're going to do looping. But this is, if you'll notice where it is in the course, is right after our control structures, our if statements, conditional operators, switch statements, and so forth. And you can combine that programming technique with looping to get a lot of power in your programs. And looping is really what we like to use computers for. They can go over and over and over a massive amount of data very quickly and return us only things that meet our criteria or fail to meet our criteria. Okay, so looping is used simply to repeat a block of statements. Now this can be as large or small or as complex as we want it to be. Now we can repeat this block of statements a finite number of times that we determine before the loop ever starts, or we can have it loop through until a certain condition is met, until all of our October invoices have been added up, you know, until all of our employees who live in a certain zip code has been pulled, that sort of thing. Now you have really 3 basic choices in C++ for looping And that's what I'm going to cover in a separate video for each one. The first one's going to be the for loop. Now this is kind of the basic loop. You'll see some code there, very simple examples, so you can get your head around them. Then we'll take a look at the while loop, and we'll talk about what makes it unique and why you would want to use it as opposed to the for. And then we'll do the do loop, or what's also called the do while loop. So loops are something very simple when you look at them in a very simple example, but you can really do some complex things with these, and you can really make some magic happen with your coding. All right, so in the next few videos we're going to take a look at the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop.